Hey there, hail stalkers. Meteorologist Martin Lattimore here. We are looking at another day of severe weather. After we've already seen more of the large hail and very strong winds that we saw yesterday, we are just going to run it back and bring us another day of that hail. Now, today we are expecting baseball-sized hail. This is expected across parts of North Dakota and the northern plains. It's kind of a regular summer setup. We usually do see these hailstones falling across parts of the northern plains, but as we get into the latter part of the day, we could actually see some tornadoes associated with it as well. Some strong tornadoes. This is actually from the Storm Prediction Center, what they're saying on that tornado risked areas, and we'll talk about where specifically those risks are at coming soon. So your severe weather timeline, we are going to be expecting those in the late afternoon to evening, so it might be a little bit later in the day that we could see these storms. But again, they're going to be moving their way across the northern plains. But before we talk about what we're going to be seeing, let's step back and see what we saw yesterday, because it was a very action-packed day for both hail and, surprisingly, wind. We'll talk about that in just a second, what happened at Salina. So first of all, going through Denver, we were watching Denver specifically for hail as we were seeing these storms kind of firing up around 1, 2 o'clock right there. They moved into Denver, brought in some of that hail reports. Most of it was about 1.5 inch hail reports. We had a couple more warnings to the further south, but we saw plenty of hail that was out across Denver. This one video right here you're going to see is from Aurora, so check this out. Super loud hail. There was a lot of that high volume hail across Denver. There was some larger hail reports that were outside of the metro, but it was just another day, a lot of that high volume severe hail. As it made its way through, it did bring in some more of that larger hail just right across I-70 from Lehman all the way into Burlington. But we're going to scoot over to Kansas as another cell started moving through. This one had some hail associated with it, but this quickly ended up turning into a wind event as it made its way into Salina, Kansas. This thing had tons of these severe thunderstorms. When you see these hashes here, these double hashes, a lot of these are what we call destructive tag storms, because you can't point out each individual one of these, but there was immense amount of damage that was from Salina. So we'll pull up some of those photos there, but I'm going to tell you exactly what happened in Salina. As this bow echo made its way through into Salina, we had winds reach upwards over 100 miles an hour. Two individual reports over 110, specifically 111 and 113 mile an hour wind gusts. They didn't confirm there was a tornado, so all we can really say is that this was just straight line wind damage across Salina. We had reports of 92, we had 98, we had tons of 80 mile an hour wind gust reports. This one brought in immense amounts of wind across Salina. We've heard a lot of reports of damage out there, as you saw from those photos, but this did continue on, almost making its way into Kansas City. Luckily, it did kind of lose that umph. You can kind of see that outflow really pushing its way out as it's made its way through Kansas City, or getting into Kansas City. So luckily, it wasn't as intense as it made its way through Kansas City, but still very strong winds indeed. And this is kind of going to be our setup we're seeing right now. There's that low pressure. It's going to be associating with some of these storms. We're already starting to see a little bit of initiation already in parts of western North Dakota. And with this high pressure down here, we should be avoiding most of these storms. But up north, that's where we're going to be seeing a lot more of those storms. A little bit of the leftovers from those storms that were in Kansas City the other day. More of these, much warmer further south, and there's that initiation trying to push through in North Dakota. Overall, very warm. You're seeing this plume of warm air. Minneapolis is at 81 degrees. Wow, it is going to be a warm one across most of the country. Oklahoma City is already at 87, Dallas at 87 as well. So if you're going to be out, maybe doing some roofing, it's going to be a hot one out there. Severe weather outlook. We are going to be seeing this stretching down into parts of Kansas and even into the Panhandle regions of Oklahoma and Texas. So that high pressure to the southeast is going to keep those storms at bay, but we could see a couple of these strindles make their way down into much further south into the Panhandle regions, but our main focus really will be the Dakotas, especially North and South Dakota, as these storms initiate along this line just near Bismarck, just to the east of Rapid City. I think Rapid City is going to avoid most of the severe threat. Those storms are probably going to initiate to your east, so you're going to avoid those. But the east side of the city, they could be seeing some more of those storms right to the entrances of the Badlands across I-80. You could be seeing some of those storms initiating there. I imagine I-80 is not going to be a fun place to be this afternoon as we get into our Tuesday. So Wednesday, storms are slowly but surely, this low pressure pushing these storms ever so slowly into the Great Lakes region. Places like Milwaukee, Minneapolis, I think is going to be our big one for getting hail for your Wednesday. I think that's going to be the city to talk about tomorrow for getting the largest hailers is going to be your Minneapolis. Almost into Chicago, but Chicago's not going to be getting it on Wednesday. It's going to be Thursday. They're kind of bullseyed on for a lot of that severe weather threat, both wind and hail as of right now. Could also see some of these storms trying to spark up towards St. Louis, but I'm willing to bet Chicago is probably going to be hard to avoid those storms come Thursday. We get into our Friday, severe weather threat does start falling down a little bit, but it's going to be in some heavily populated areas in the mid-Atlantic and into New England. So those storms right there moving through. Meanwhile, in another initiation on your Saturday, small little marginal risk. This could probably get upgraded to a slight between now and Saturday. Omaha, just to the south of Kansas, just to the north of Kansas City, could include Salina yet again. Yeah, it's going to be another busy day for Salina. They've already had several of those storms. There's this low pressure system right here. This is slowly moving its way across as we get into that Tuesday and Wednesday. Finally starting to push it away. That's how we're going to see these storms moving eventually into the mid-Atlantic and New England. But as we get into our Thursday to Friday, we start seeing another little low, this small little shortwave trying to push its way through. That's what could initiate some storm development on that Saturday. So, we're not exactly out of the woods when it comes to these storms, but we could be seeing some more development as we have this little bit of a short wave associated with this low pressure system up in Canada, trying to reinitialize some more storms coming into our next weekend and into our next work week, although that is several days out. So a little bit could change between now and then. Your wind forecast, it's going to be another big windy day across the northern plains. Bismarck and Pierre, I think those are going to be your two cities really associated with the heavy wind. Again, Rapid City, if we get these storms to initiate a little bit westward, I think we could have some, but current models are really outputting most of those storms to fire at least right on top or to the east of the city. Again, if you're on the east side of the city, you might see some storms, but if you're right on the border with Wyoming or Montana, it's going to be tough to get those storms out there. We could see some more initiation and more of those winds out toward Minneapolis and Grand Fork, but I really do think the Dakotas are going to be the big one for your wind forecast for today. Tornado forecast, a little bit of the same. We are really mainly isolated with the heaviest risk in North Dakota. Minot, Bismarck, Grand Forks, right in between the border of North Dakota and Minnesota. You're going to be seeing those biggest risks there. Although we could be seeing a little bit of these stretching down into South Dakota, maybe even into Nebraska as well. We do have that small marginal risk that does stretch down all the way to Kansas, including another marginal risk out here in southern Indiana and into parts of Kentucky. It also does include Louisville, so stray storm over toward Louisville could be possible for your afternoon today. Now we're talking about the hail forecast. We are looking at the possibility of up to baseball-sized hail. We're not, basically expecting the softball, but if we do have a 3-incher or 3.5-incher fall down, it would not surprise me, but I'm still willing to bet we're going to be seeing mostly baseball-sized hail as that max hail size for your day today. But again, softball could be possible with a stray really strong storm. So let's look at the hail forecast for today as we get into our afternoon. We got the chances again in Minot, Bismarck, Grand Forks, Pierre, Rapid City. Again, it just depends on the storm initiation for Rapid City. I don't think we'll be seeing many of these storms getting out here toward Iowa or Minnesota, but the thing is that we could see some of these, as they develop into what we call QLCSs or MCS, cluster of thunderstorms, basically, they could still have some of that just along the severe limit of that 1-inch hail. But I think really our largest hail is going to be limited to this corridor right along almost I-35. I believe I-35 travels this direction right here. But again, just along this line right here, right along the Dakotas and Nebraska, that's going to be your best chance to see those storms. So again, Minot, Bismarck, Grand Forks, Pierre. I think we're going to miss Rapid City, but I wouldn't be shocked if we get one storm trying to fire a little bit early. North Platte as well. Salina, I don't think you'll be getting much today, but I don't want to count it out yet. I don't want to say no after the busy day you guys have already had and the hailstorm you had last week as well. So it's been a very busy past couple of days for Salina. So again, future radar watching as we are going to be seeing these storms developing across North Dakota. I'm going to actually move this real quick so we can get a better view out there, again, across parts of North Dakota. There it is right there, initial storm development. See, again, line of storms are just trying to form out here, but as we get into Rapid City, I think we're going to be missing it. Let's say Wednesday and Thursday, John. Pull that back up again. Hail forecast for Wednesday and Thursday. So we actually will get into that in just a second. For that Wednesday and Thursday, we are looking at some of those chances eventually trying to make their way back in, and they're all mostly moving to the east. So we'll talk about that in just a moment there, Evan. So again, that line of storms, this is where that wind threat's going to be popping into for your Tuesday night. Looking at 9 o'clock right there for those storms. I'm going to back it up just a little bit to see when we first see a little bit of that storm development. So this is, again, 5:30 is that first couple of storms. So it might be a little bit later this afternoon when we see these first cluster of thunderstorms really starting to pop in across North and South Dakota and eventually conglomerate into those lines later on, which we could still see much more of those very, very strong winds, upwards to 85, 90 miles an hour like we had yesterday. Would not surprise me if we see some of those. Stretching again all the way down to Sioux Falls, almost stretching into Sioux City for more of those clusters of storms. We could see maybe a tail end Charlie or something like this, trying to bring in some of those storms with a little bit better hail chances, but that's all to really be seen as we get in the later part of our Wednesday. Getting into that Wednesday, again, I want to show you really what's going on. This is being a pain for me, isn't it? As we get into that Tuesday afternoon, this is really the big one for your wind and hail, again, in North Dakota. So let's actually move on to what we're seeing for that hail model. So as we get into our Tuesday, there's some more of these hail chances further south, but I do want to show you further north what we're seeing for that hail model. Look at that. You're seeing a lot of these oranges and even a little bit of the dark oranges, not quite red just yet, but as we get into that afternoon, couple hours from now, there's some of those darker reds really starting to pop in there, not too shabby across parts of northern North Dakota. That's right on the border of Canada. I'm going to advance just a little bit further. I think I saw a little bit of red. Yeah, just across the border into Canada, we got a little bit of red. Who's to say that couldn't drift a little bit further south? You see a lot of these holes starting to pop in here. That's after those storms do develop. So again, a lot of these areas could be seeing some very large hail alongside those storms and just ahead of it for that Tuesday. So let's bring in some of those model data so we actually see what's going on with our radar alongside our hail model. Because if you have the conditions, but you have no storms, you can have all the ingredients, but if you can't get the storms to initiate, it's going to be a hard time to really get a lot of those storms. So there we go. Already starting to see some of these storms. That one's right there. If that model was wanting to show up, that could be easily a pretty big hailer across that 5, 6, 7 o'clock time frame. Again, once these storms do develop into the lines, it's going to be more difficult to get that hail, but the wind will be a big risk. But I still don't think completely that if we start seeing these storms falling into lines that it's just going to, hail risk is all the way down. We absolutely can see some of those hailstones with this line of storms. It's just normally we see mostly a wind threat once they form into those what we call MCSs. Hail forecast for your Wednesday. Again, you're drifting a little bit further east. Again, Minneapolis is my city that I think we're going to see the biggest chance for those hailers. I think La Crosse is also probably going to be another one we could see in Wisconsin. The risk of that hail does travel pretty far south. Omaha, Kansas City, Wichita, I think all three of these cities have the chance. It's a little bit lesser than up here for our Wednesday. I think Minneapolis, again, has that best chance. You're closer to the low in Minneapolis versus Omaha, Kansas City, and Wichita. I just don't want to discount the threat of possibility of seeing one or two of those storms going severe and bringing in some pretty large hail across parts of the central and maybe even in the southern plains into parts of South Kansas. That could be an absolute possibility. Wind forecast is going to be a little bit further to the east. The storms initialize. They bring mostly a hail risk in Minneapolis, and they travel into parts of Iowa, Wisconsin, and Illinois. I think that's going to be your best places to see some strong wind. Still continuing to see the possibility of wind all the way down in toward parts of Kansas. Tornado forecast kind of split in the middle. Where we're seeing the storms both supercells and also as an MCS. So La Crosse, you're kind of bullseyed for that best chance for tornadoes. So be prepared as you get throughout the rest of your Wednesday, especially the afternoon, showing that tornado risk for your Wednesday. Now, temperatures are expected to finally start cooling down across nationwide, really. We're going to see a big cool down, so that might tamper our severe weather threat just a little bit, but we're talking like next week. So cool down coming in after those storms. You can see that large scale shortwave bringing in much cooler air, but it kind of gets pushed back by that low pressure as we get into our Friday and Saturday. But there's that fight right there, another surge of that cool air coming in on Sunday. So I think we could see, at least across this part of the country, mainly a bit of a drop off on our temperatures. But if you do want to notice, normally we see much hotter temperatures here in the south. And what this does right here is it actually shuts off the severe weather through the high pressure. So if we can get the cooler temperatures to kind of stabilize down a little bit further south, we could see some redevelopment of storms in the southern plains and maybe the southeast. Finally, the southeast has kind of been avoiding those storms all year long, but we could finally see some more of them actually a little bit further south. So temperatures are going to be staying pretty warm over the next several days. 94 in Oklahoma City, Albuquerque's at 95. That's a triple digit in El Paso. Man, it's going to be hot out there. Again, temperatures really staying warm, even up further north. Minneapolis at 84 degrees. That's going to be the reason you're going to see those storms really initializing and getting very intense for your Wednesday afternoon. We got very warm and humid air across parts of the north. There's that big frontal boundary moving its way in, trying to fight against the high pressure that's established itself across the south for your weekend. But see that initial surge, and then eventually that cool air really starts filtering its way in as we get into our Sunday morning. 46 in Billings in the morning. Man, that's going to be a chilly one. Needing the jacket for that day. But again, by Sunday afternoon, Kansas City's at 73, Oklahoma City's at 79. Much cooler, but Dallas in 96. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit toasty out there. One last look at your future radar. We're going to be watching, again, these storms developing across the entirety of the region. I'm going to back this up just one little sec. There we go. We can move that a little bit further. Well, if it'll let me move. It's not going to let me move. Cool. But again, these line of storms that are going to be rolling their way across for our Tuesday afternoon and evening, those will be our big weather makers, bringing again initially hail. Then as they move their way across the Dakotas and over toward, I believe that's I-35. I believe it's I-35. But again, moving its way across the interstate there, we'll be bringing mostly wind, continuing to our Thursday, watching for these storms to develop across parts of the Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Illinois region. And as we get into our Friday, that's where that initialization of these storms here that could be affecting Chicago come that Friday afternoon. And then as we get into our expanded forecast, we're watching mostly for this one last round of storms before we get into our Friday. And then we start seeing much cooler air diving its way down as we get into our Sunday. Look at that, a little bit of a mix in the upper parts of Wyoming. How about that? June, seeing wintry mix. Mountains are weird. But again, as we go throughout the rest of our evening, we are seeing, again, those temperatures starting to fall down as we get into our middle part of our June. Noticing much cooler air. We've kind of been really warm across the south, so it would be a nice little break from this very hot and intense air we've been looking at. Temperatures have been getting 90, 95 degrees. If you're wanting to hop on a roof, I mean, those roofs can get upwards to 150 to 190 degrees. So a little bit of a cool down, that will absolutely help you get some roofs replaced as we get into the middle part of our June. I doubt it'll last, June, July. We will absolutely be seeing these temperatures bouncing back very quickly. A little bit more moisture. Some places that don't necessarily want any moisture. I know a lot of rain has fallen across eastern Oklahoma and Arkansas. Maybe don't want to see more of that rain. But it looks like the expanded forecast is showing more of that moisture, especially in the further south. So if we can maintain warm temperatures and get some moisture on there, we can actually see some rare summer storms in the southeast. So that is the one thing we could be seeing later on. If you missed it, severe weather outlook showing again across the northern plains, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska. We got Wisconsin as well, not Wisconsin, Minnesota, also looking at the good chance. Also a little bit of an update there, including parts of Oklahoma and Kansas. That was actually an update from this morning. Moving into tomorrow, it's going to shift over to Wisconsin, including Chicago, although I still think Minneapolis is going to be the big city that's going to be getting the best chance for those hailstones. Initialization of the storms is probably going to be right along this orange and yellow line right here. That's probably one of those first couple of storms will fire. They'll move their way across Wisconsin. I think Chicago is going to be the day for our Thursday. See that best chance. This will eventually move on to the East Coast as we get into our Friday. So that's about it. John, do we have any questions? I want to see if there's actually any updates from the Storm Prediction Center, if we've had anything so far. Any questions, John? Question about the orange?
Yeah.
What about the orange?
Let me pop it up.
Sure. Why do you see the orange everywhere? Does it not hail everywhere? There is orange. So the thing about hail is that it is actually dependent on supercells. Supercells are very small storms compared to like what you expect for like what we call mesoscale convective systems or MCSs. Those are much more widespread. So your supercells, I'm going to try to pull up something real quick. So your hail forecast really just says that anywhere in this orange right here, we're seeing the possibility of getting that size potential of that $50 to about your golf ball sized hailstones. Now, does this mean everywhere in this orange is going to get hail? Absolutely not. But when it comes to these storms developing, specifically for your Wednesday on this map right here, the storms will eventually develop mostly along this orange line right here, and they will travel to the east. So Minneapolis, again, I've been saying is going to be that best chance to get those storms for your Wednesday. I do still hold on to that right now. I think that Minneapolis will see those storms. But when you see these storms kind of fire, it just depends on where that storm fires. It's like yesterday when we had Denver get that one supercell that went right through northern downtown. That was a kind of a pinpoint. We kind of expected that to maybe happen, but if it was just a couple miles north, Denver would have had nothing. If it was a couple miles south, then we could have seen Denver get absolutely mollywopped in downtown like it was a few weeks ago when we had that storm that was going right through downtown. So, unless you have any other questions, didn't look like there's any big updates from the Storm Prediction Center. So if you want to be getting anything from us, me and Taylor, we post to social media all the time, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. If you're interested in a hail map, you can actually call our offices. We've got a lot of guys here, a lot of guys and gals here that are willing to take your calls, 855-334-4245, or just go to the website. We got the previews and the maps there. If you're interested in buying a map, you can get a hold of us or you can purchase it on the website. So John, anything? Nothing? All good. All right, guys. We're going to be getting ready to really be watching the forecast for the next couple hours. You might be seeing more of us later on if we get some of these storms, especially up towards Bismarck. So we're going to be heading off here. We'll be wrapping up this forecast. But again, you'll probably see more of us later on this afternoon. And of course, you'll see us back here tomorrow at noon. So don't go anywhere. We'll be back here again, same time, same place tomorrow.